Welcome everyone. Tuesday morning, and we are back on the career development and time management recording for the graduates of the University of Melbourne. I have today with me Tevita Lesuma, the General Manager for Strategic Partnership and Student Engagement, who's co-facilitating this discussion on time management. Before we commence, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet. And I'm meeting on the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I also acknowledge the lands of the traditional custodians of the lands because we are broadcasting across Victoria. And I also want to pay my respect to the past, present, and emerging leaders and the custodians of our land, the Aboriginal people and the Torres Strait Islanders. So as we have progressed into literally week 8 of the COVID-19 crisis, GSA has made every attempt to provide a 10 o'clock webinar to our graduates to ensure that there is an opportunity for us to share information, to provide you some tips and skills to manage the crisis period, but also to continue with some of our activities. So I'd like to welcome all the attendees today. It's wonderful. We have about 18 people registered, but people will join us. It's a wonderful time for you to come along, ask questions, and today's session is really focused on time management. We thought of time management because in an area where we are actually dealing with self-isolation and maybe a bit of a relaxed, slowly as we progress into a relaxed restriction, we have to think of concept of time, which is very important, and often that can create a lot of anxiety for us while we are trying to manage our home life, our personal life, and also continue, some of us in our jobs and some of you continuing with a part-time job or your studies. So it's really important for us to kind of talk about the concept of time. So today, the session has been put together with the support of Management Excellence, and the content is derived from there. But really, Tevita and I would just like to talk about what some of the strategies are and what tools we can use. So moving on to our importance of why is time management important. I think people use this statement, at an interview, like, so what are your time management skills? What are your organizational skills? Actually, time management is about being conscious of how you control the time that you spend on a specific activity. So I'm sure if you're baking a cake or you're doing something at home and you say, I'm going to have a lazy day, I'm going to spend my time really looking after myself. For you, that at that moment of time, you may say, I don't really want to be managing my time. I want to be relaxing and enjoying my time. So this is not a concept that you have to use all the time. But I think when you are particularly focusing on a task, if you are studying, if you are completing a job, if you are planning for an event, it's important to take a conscious decision of how much of my time am I going to spend on a specific activity. And when you are thinking about that, when you allocate the time, you're actually thinking about managing your productivity, how you can become efficient on the time that you're utilizing, how to be effective, and also to ensure that do I have the skills, do I have the knowledge, do I have the tools to actually complete this task? What kind of, so if I'm doing an assignment, okay, instead of starting off typing up the assignment, have I allocated enough time to do some reading? Have I had some discussions with my colleagues or industry or with my lecturer so that I actually have the knowledge, and following that, I can then develop a schedule about how much of time I'm going to allocate my assignment. So really, whether it's a job or whether it's a concept that you are thinking about to implement, or your exam of your your study period, how much of, I've got 3 subjects and the exams are coming, how many days am I going to allocate for each of my subject, or if it's a group assignment. So really, time management is a theory of actually identifying how much of time you're going to spend on a specific activity. So moving on, I'm going to ask Tevita that, we understand that, being able to master this time of skill has some certain outcomes, like it's important when you're talking about saving your time. I think the biggest thing for us is reducing stress. As the time keeps ticking and the numbers go down, your stress starts increasing if you haven't met your milestone. And also being productive. Like if some people just sit at the desk the whole day, not worrying about, I'm just going to get onto it and get onto it, ignoring looking after yourself, being able to actually focus on other things and concentrating so much of energy on one particular task, you start fatiguing. There's this level where you develop a sense of fatigue. You feel as if, my God, I am so tired, I'm not being productive. And ultimately, you notice as your assignments, you reach the end of your assignment, the quality starts dropping. You may be, less energetic to think of new ideas or examples. You sometimes just don't get the work done. So you really want to do it to save time, reduce stress, be more productive, get good results, get more work done, and have a bit of control over yourself. So either it's completing a job or an exam, and that you have the responsibility to complete the work that you're given, be it at work or be at if you're doing a group assignment, if somebody's asked you to do a task, you know that you're managing well. So Tevita, can you tell me a little bit about, you are a manager who runs so many activities at GSA. Why do you think it's important for your team to actually manage time when they're doing activities or events? Just give us an example of how do you think about it?
Right. Yeah. Thanks for having me, Rachna, on the show. But so the importance for us, especially in activities and events for managing time, is it's deadline driven. So just like exams or assignments or papers, there is a time when something is due. And for us, we work backwards normally. And the importance for managing this time is because we want to make sure, one, it's delivered on time. We have, the responsibility to all our students to make sure when we say something, it's delivered on that time. But also it links in with budget. So if something is delivered on time or managed well in a timely manner, it tends to stay within the budget. So we're not always spending extra money to get things done quicker, or we forgot about something last minute. So the time management function for any activities and events is crucial. And also to manage time, if you're not doing it well, it does have knock-on effects. So if you manage your time well, you'll be able to have the extra time to be developing the next thing or thinking about the next thing. And I think this links in nicely with assessments, is that yes, you have exams, but if you have more than one exam, you've got to think about the time between those deadlines to be able to put as much as you can to deliver the best outcome for yourself or for us as GSA for our event. So the knock-on effect is what we always think about when we're managing time. And also if your time's managed well, it does create calm. So if you are organized and you're getting things done in the time that you were allocated, it actually creates calm. So you talked about before about reducing stress. For my team especially, if we know we can complete things on time, we're not stressing about the 3 events that are happening in the next 3 weeks after, because we've got a strict timeline that we're adhering to. So yeah, essentially making sure we're looking at time based on delivering things on time within budget, making sure that we understand the knock-on effects if time isn't managed well, and creating calm for the team and organization.
That sounds really good. So moving on to looking at, the concept that, I think it's very well understood that we have to ensure we manage the time effectively and the resources. So one of the things that I have found very helpful for myself to manage anything that I do is to have this little, have you seen that icon, which is really about let's manage, let's focus, avoid, and limit. You know, those are the words that come to me really clearly in my mind. So if you plan effectively, by planning, all you need to do is be effective, you know, really be effective. Like, how do I set myself some small goals? What's the objective? And be ambitious. That means, let's say you are preparing for a graduate application. You want to be writing in a graduate application, and you think, I've thought about this job really well. I'm really going to write this application. I really want this job, and I think I've got the skills and the knowledge. So you are setting yourself a goal of writing that application really well. You have clear idea when you read the key selection criteria, what those objectives of that job are and how your skills will be translated into writing that application, and putting yourself in a real goal and saying, I'm going to get this completed on time, not at 5 and press the button when, you know, your computer doesn't work, but 2 hours before, where I can actually get it on time, read it 2 or 3 times and get that in. That is setting some goals, or setting some time limit or deadline to the work to be completed. That means if you have an orientation day coming up, Tevita doesn't think about that 2 days before the orientation. He starts thinking about it well before that, and we'll talk to him a little bit about how his team takes planning. But I want to talk to graduates really about your exams that are coming up and your assignments. That if you have a group assignment, you're really, really clear. Hey guys, we're having a Zoom meeting. We're catching up at this particular time, sending reminders, telling people, come for that meeting. It's going to be there. Really being clear. Yes, you have the 10 minutes of chit chat, but then being very clear of how do we work together as a team? Does each one of us know? And there will be a natural leader, you know, hey, I'm going to write down what we've all agreed to do. And if people says, oh, don't worry, I'll get it to you, I think it's more important to say, when are we going to get it? How, you know, and can you assure us, so that you can send a gentle reminder to the person saying, hey, I'm waiting for you to complete this calculation before I can write a summary of this, your calculation and the recommendation. So doing things that are important. Often, if you notice, what do? I did the easy things and got it out of the way. That's our normal conversation. But I think trying to prioritize that, do the hard things, do a couple of easy things, but don't leave all the hard things at the end, because it's going to stress you out. And also, sometimes I think, just as you would write an exam, is that you do need to ensure that you're allocating the right time for the right activity. So not spending time on things that you love, writing about, and not spending time. It's like when you write an exam paper, allocate your time for the question sections. So even with a job, you know, you go to your graduate job and they say, you know, hey, why don't you just sit down and prepare for us a project plan for this work? You're very clear what my objectives are, what's my goal, when do you need it, ensure that your supervisor is getting that 2 to 3 hours before, so that if there's any final feedback, you have time. You've written down how to complete the project plan, the things that are tough, you're going to get it done quickly, and write the tasks down. Even if it is a small thing, I have to, save it as a PDF. If it is, print 2 copies of the document before I go to a presentation, and be disciplined. So I love this little slide that puts that clear to me that, I've got to manage my time, I've got to focus, I have to avoid distraction, and I have to understand there's limitation to me. So I love that. I love that little 4-box thing, which is really manage, focus, avoid, and limit. So Tevita, give me a bit of an example, like, you people just roll out activities year after year, month after month, week after week. Tell me a little bit about how your team undertakes planning, because graduates would understand that from a work perspective.
Yeah, fantastic. So for us, orientation is our biggest event in both semesters, and so for us, what we tend to do, our first meeting, our initial meeting at the start, is literally getting together and agreeing on the date and the time and format of the orientation. So it's usually the first week of orientation, but we have to decide on timings, and then the format, and we also look at feedback from the last year. Look at feedback, and so we decide on time, date, and we want to say, okay, so what are our outcomes of the day? And similar to assessments, it's like, what are our outcomes? I want to reach this goal, I want to reach goal, and how do we measure that? For us, we're like, this is what we want to achieve, and we need to make these measurements in place so we can actually look back at this and see what's how we did. And then we, in the same meeting, we look at allocating the tasks to the team. So this is based on what their role is essentially, but also their skill set. So if we need to look at suppliers, we need to look at the promotional aspect, we need to social media, we need some graphic design. So that sort of starts to allocate the tasks in that first meeting. And then what we do, we agree as a group on what communication tool we will use to inform each other about the updates and set up schedule for our regular updates to make sure we're all on the same page and we all know what everyone's up to. And so we can also support each other during this time. And then lastly, in this first meeting, we always discuss contingencies. So we always say, okay, what's the worst case scenario? What happens if this happens? What's a plan B? What's a plan C? And we set that up in the first meeting, so it sets expectations throughout the rest of our meeting. So yeah, the planning part of any event, especially orientation, is key just to get those foundations in, and then we build from that as we get closer to our deadlines.
Okay, moving on to the next concept, that is, we have talked about the process, the time managed process. That is, you think of a cost, you actually identify that time is money. That's very, very important. Like even as a student, that if you are doing part-time work or you're not completing a subject on time, then it is costing you money. And you do need to ensure that you're keeping a record, how much you've got the goal there, you've planned, you've prioritized, and you've scheduled, as Tevita gave us a highlight. So moving on, let's look at the concept, Tevita. If we were to look at when we say, money, that time is money, what does it actually mean? So it actually means that if you waste time, you're actually, you're giving yourself less time. But if it's a workplace, you are wasting resources. And often the concept, the product or the event coming up will definitely not be as effective as you wanted it to be. So I guess that, if you, and one of the things I'd like to tell the graduates, which I feel has been very important for me personally, is how you plan your studies and how you do your academic work gets very translated at your workplace. Because at school you have your family and you have controls and measures that help you. Then you kind of go through this undergraduate period where you're learning how to kind of get that experience of independence. But pretty much at a graduate level, with researcher level, coursework level, PhD students, you are your own boss, okay? And you actually can decide how much of time you can. Of course, you have your supervisor and the guidelines, but I think it's important to try and develop the skill of mastering your fine skills, like your organizational development skills and time management skills. And that's why at interviews, people ask you, what are your organizational skills and time management skills? Because they want to know that if you are employed to do a job, what is the real cost of actually employing you? It's not only the salary, but it's about your effectiveness and your efficiency, which is value for money. And remember that, like, it's a course, you join a course, you decide to not give it too much of rigor in the beginning, then you reach the end, and then you aspire to get a HD, but you didn't get time and you kind of just managed to scrape through. That's fine. And if you're content with that, that's fine. But let's say your next career progression depends on the marks that you got now. That means you're actually wasting that time and you're progressing. your life and your progress is not going to have that continuity or contingency plan. And if you don't achieve your goals in time, it also costs you, because in particularly if you're a student, it's like, you know, all the, apart from the fees, you have the cost of your time, the cost of your other you know, financial costs that is there, and your family time. And it's important that remember your action always has an impact on someone else. So let's say for today's session, I came here, you know, with the least amount of preparation, not had slides or anything. All the people who have registered to be attendees, I'm actually wasting their time because I haven't done my job. And I think if you have that ripple on effect, we actually will understand what does cost of time mean. So we'll move on to, you know, the next slide, which is really of getting an example of why you should keep a log or record of the work or activity. So actually, I like the concept of people, you know, keeping some time, keeping a log book or keeping like a task list. I love that. And Tevita, would you be able to tell me, like, you know, if your team is going to do a job, how do you keep record of a project or a plan or a event? Do you keep logs or records, or what actually happens?
Yeah, so for us, our whole process is documented from our first meeting and our brainstorming to implementation. So we use many tools to record our updates to the team. And so I guess it's more of a check-in, and we can actually look back and monitor and measure what we've done to achieve that goal. So yeah, the keeping a log of records for activities and tasks is extremely important in terms of us running our events. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And can we, so it's actually really beneficial, isn't it? Because you, when you put down the task, you actually know all the realistic things that you have to do. You know, it's going to cost, you know, how much of time you have, how much, what are the difficulties you're going to be incurring. You will be able to actually be able to say, okay, I'm going to get this person to do this job task because obviously his or her skill set is good. Applies the same also for a group assignment. Applies the same even if you're doing casual work. Okay, you know, I've got to kind of get 10 widgets done within 15 minutes or whatever, and it's an assembly kind of unit. Have I got the process clearly documented? Can I practice it 2 or 3 times? And then you kind of keep an eye on, you know, how many widgets you can get done in a couple of, in, you know, in an hour, and that will mean in 2 hours I'll get this done. So it's applicable wherever you go. So let's move on to the next group of thoughts that we really want to talk about. Is the first task is setting a goal, you know, really goal setting. And the goal setting can be as simple as small goals, medium goals, and long-term goals. We don't want you know, you to finish this session and say, okay, I'm going to set up my lifetime goals. Gee, that would be great, but you know, start small, medium, and long-term goals. And really ask yourself, why are you setting that goal? And you know, what does that actually goal mean to you? What does it actually mean to you? If I'm going to you know, learn the piano, and if that is my goal, why am I learning the piano just because other 10 people are learning it? No, it's actually going to, you know, I love music. That's what I want to do. I want to develop this skill, and this is really important to me. And while you're doing that, while you're thinking of the bigger goals, don't forget the smaller goals that you will achieve along the way, and the medium term that will, your small goals actually help you to your medium goals and your long-term goals. So sometimes when I talk about studying for graduates, you know, you have so many responsibilities, so many responsibilities. You're thinking of work, you're thinking of family, you're thinking about your accommodation, you're thinking about your relationships. And I think sometimes you have to kind of think of, you know, what's the time, days I have, what's the hour, and trying to keep a diary. I love the diary concept, whether it's on your iPhone or somewhere. But I think having some goals for your day, having some goals, even people who are dealing with mental health. You know, it's so important to say, you know what, after every task, I'm going to give myself a 10-minute time to just meditate or just to relax or to do some deep breaths, because that was going to be helping me for my mental health and well-being. And periodically, I love the task, keeping a task list and scratching it off and saying, I've done this, or ticking it. Really, gee, you know, it gives you an amazing sense of achievement. Like, I love my task list, and my books are filled with task lists. And even sometimes looking at the task list can be a bit of a nightmare. Oh my God, I have so much to do. But as you kick goals and cut them off, you feel, wow, good, well done. That seems really achievable. And, you know, even if it's small or big, be happy with what you've achieved. And if you're struggling, I'll thank you so much to the attendees who've come today, that, you know, your knowledge and understanding is really important. I have this wonderful question, is how to be more accurately estimating how long a particular task takes when you're doing it for the first time. Can I say to you, always the first time, it's very hard to estimate a time. I have a very good suggestion to you. Better to do not underestimate it. In the beginning, overestimate. So if a task is going to take you an hour, I always suggest to people, give it an hour and 10 minutes or 15 minutes, because you may just finish it in 7 or 8, and that's fine. But I think it's good to ensure that you are not underestimating, because when you underestimate the time and you feel, oh, I can get that done, and you don't think of the factors that impact that work, then you are going to be stressed about it. So yes, fantastic question. How to be more accurately estimating how long? The beginning, you may not be able to estimate it, but I actually say, do not underestimate, allocate more time, and the time that you save, actually use it for something that you can, you know, allow yourself a treat, maybe a little bit of time for music or doing things that you can. So really,
sorry, Rachna, I was wondering if I could add something to that.
Fantastic, please.
Yeah. Look, so great question there, and we talk about this goal setting, and then I'm trying to link in what we talked about before about realistic timelines. And so you mentioned before, always give a little bit, and that's just exactly the same for us. So when we do our timelines, we actually stretch them out slightly. So a task that might only take a day, we might add an extra day or two on the end, because you have to have contingencies, because other things pop up. And it's just like, I mean, you're studying for exams and you've got your assignments, but you also have other commitments in your life. And so with other things that pop through, you need to give a little bit of space for yourself. So, you know, in your timeline, thinking about what's in your control and not in your control. So, you know, if something comes up, I've got a couple of hours to spare. And if you finish early, that's you can bank that time. And I think that's a key message there, is that especially when we're doing things, we actually look at what GSA's commitments are over the year. And so we don't want to stretch ourselves too thin. And if we think actually there's a bit of crossover, we might be distracted or have influence from a different space, let's give ourselves a little extra time at the end of these deadlines so that we're not stressed and working against ourselves.
Thank you, Tevita. So let's move on. And I love this little picture about, you know, if those who are attendees and can see it, is this little where you're pushing your goal forward, but then there's somebody pulling you behind. And I know it's graphically looks a bit difficult, but I think it makes me realize that I may have lots of dreams and I can set goals, but you know, dreaming doesn't cost you anything. So dream for the best, okay? But I think I sometimes like that reality check between what is a dream and what's achievable, and being able to really ask yourself, am I setting myself real achievable goals? And you know, the one that I talked about, do I really, these goals, are they small, are they medium and long, and is it something that I have? And setting up a goal ladder is a beautiful picture. Like, okay, when I finish this part of my assignment, I can start going into doing calculate. I'm going to do a lot of research and reading, discuss with my friends. Then I'm going to put some dot points about how to write these assignment. Then I'm going to plan how I'm going to lay out my thoughts. Oh no, I need to go and do some more research on that. Then I'm going to do my, first, don't start writing your executive summary before you finish your, your entire project. Write up the whole paper, then come back to an executive summary which summarizes what you've put into the paper. Go back to your recommendations and see, are they clear? Are they concise? So that's a perspective from an assignment, but even from a job, I've got this project to do. How am I going to have a clear pathway of how I'm going to get there? Similarly with your graduate applications, what are the jobs I look for? And okay, I don't seem to be successful for these. Maybe I should start thinking about my medium-term goals, instead of your dream job. So it's really to ask the questions is what to do when there are challenges, and how really, if I've got a challenge, if I'm not able to achieve this, what's my next goal? So let's move on to the next group of, and I thought I wanted to spend some time on particularly your exams, because I know that you're coming to a period where you will be preparing for your, your studying, and it's really, really important to start preparing now. June will pass, and we're already in 2 weeks into May. So really clearly having a plan about when are the, once the dates of the exam comes, you're much more clearer. But you'll be able to understand is what's the pattern of my studying going to be? How much of time am I going to spend to studying? What is a suitable environment for me to study under this, new regime where I'm kind of locked up at home and I have limitations of where I can? And really being able to, I like the flow charts. The flow charts are nothing like how your day progresses, or sometimes how your pattern of studying, like you have 20 chapters to go. What am I going to do? 5 in the first 2 weeks, or, the next 5 in the next 2 weeks, something like that. Think of old exam papers, let me not get anxious. The question is really about, have I got old papers, so that I'm not getting anxious and I'm going to be asked, let me look for some trends. Let me see what are the clear ideas. Let me see if I can discuss these answers with my colleagues or friends in a group studying. And we will be soon announcing how we're going to set up some group study spaces for you all at GSA in the virtual world, taking some regular breaks, plan for the exam day before, before the exam, you do need to relax a little bit. Don't get anxious about it, because the moment you start getting anxious right from the start of the go, you're not going to actually remain focused. So I thought these are some good tips that I felt were useful. And there's a very good question which we have is, any tips on maintaining motivation in the long term and keeping the spark alive? I'm not the expert, but I feel my spark is normally alive when I think about this day is lived well, look forward to the next. I know I'm kidding, but I think of days where every day you live to the life to the fullest, and then you look forward to the next day, and that's a beautiful day. Now, coming to some very practical tips is trying to keep a balance in life, balance between the activities that you are compelled to do and activities that you actually can enjoy, and relish. So for example, coming to a question is, keeping your motivation is asking yourself, what keeps me motivated? My motivation may be my dream job that I'm waiting as a graduate, where I'm going to get a full salary, and I'm actually not in the praise stage where I feel I've got to think of unemployment. We may all have to deal with unemployment at some time of our stage, but be thinking of something aspirational. It could be some holiday that you can plan in a couple of years and think, gee, I'm just going to get this through this course. I'm going to be working soon. And soon we are going to get a beautiful, I mean, dreaming is a one way of keeping yourself motivated. And task lists, getting them done, taking small bites and dealing with it in a constructive way without being anxious has been some of my strategies. A very good strategy is seeking help. Take help, ring stop one. If you need to have a session with career support, exam support, brilliant. Ring them, they'll assist you with, talk to your friends, they'll be able to give you some support on that. So I hope I've answered that question satisfactorily, but I don't have a 101 formula. It works differently for people, but I am sure all of us have that spark somewhere, and keeping that spark alive is that dream or that motivation. So let's move on to the next slide, Tevita. And I wanted to get your thoughts on really, we have prioritization that we talk about. You had, you were wanting to share with us, you shared with us that you get your staff to make a list, and from that list, you have an action list, from the order of it, what is the most important, you go to the least important. Then you keep on asking yourself why you've chosen to do something before the other. Because you remember, we always tend to go to do the easy things and leave the difficult things behind. So keep asking that, and do not procrastinate. If something is hard, see if you can go back, do a little easy thing and come back to the hard thing, or seek help. And don't spend so much of time on something that you don't have time for the other part. And do not put too much of time on the things that are so important that you forget to format your assignment, do the spell check, run it, check for, have you done the references correctly? These are things that are very, very important. And also when you apply for a job, the worst thing is to send a job application with spelling mistakes. Don't ever do that. Try and check those applications really well. Any other further tips, Tevita, at this point?
Yeah. I'd like to share, if I can, just a couple of the tools that we use to sort of monitor and work through the tasks associated with an event or activity or a deadline. Is that okay?
That sounds fantastic. I think that'll be a great eye opener to our, the people who are listening to this or watching today. And
yeah. So, can you see my screen at all?
Yes, I can. Yeah.
So with us, bear with me. So with us, I mean, this is an example of our webinar tracker. And so what we do is a team of us in the background that are looking to make sure we're all on the same page. So we have, our days, our dates, timings, titles of the webinars, themes. We have a list of special guests that are on board, and we also have we also look at who's allocated to the work. And so we allocate the staff member responsible for these sessions. And then we look about, has the copy been written? Has the Zoom session been scheduled? And then we also write in some links, and we monitor who's taking care of what. And we even do this, a green traffic light system where it tells us where we're at with this certain webinars. And so for me, we use this as a collaborative tool, and this is Smartsheet, but you can use anything like Google Sheets or Trello. There's plenty of things out there. And if you're doing group work, this is fantastic. But in an individual sense, it also helps you. It actually tracks where you're up to, because if you've got multiple things going on, if you've got multiple assignments, you've got job interviews or applications you need to work on, it's probably good just to write it down. And then you can see where you're at. So this is one example what we use, and this is very pertinent to what we do now. I mean, this is very live. We also have a version, if anyone's done project management out there, we also use a different kind of version of the same tool. So when we're planning projects, we actually put the timelines in. So this is an example of LEAD, our leadership program that we run every year. And we talk about we split into sections. So when we recruit, and when we talk about the induction, and when we talk about what's happening within each month, we sort of put it through these plans. And what we do is we make sure that, again, tasks are allocated to people. And then what it will do, it will spell out. So this is the waterfall style of project management. It just shows where overlaps are with certain tasks over the dates of the project. So this is also a good way to just keep an eye on things. And the question before was about long-term motivation. To be honest, I think if something, I'm a visual person. And so for me, I put something in front of me every day, whether it's on my whiteboard and I write a term, or, you know, I scribble something that's really bright and I just look at it every morning, or I have a post-it on my monitor to say, you know, this is what we need to achieve this week. Keep it going. You know, think of the end goal. Little things that help me. And Rachna was saying before, everyone has their different style, but I think if you, whatever it takes to remind you that the hard work that you're putting in is worth it, I think will help you get through those long-term, you know, those to keep you motivated long-term. So yeah, so these are a couple of tools that we use in the background just to make sure, one, our team are all on the same page and we track what we're doing, and it makes yourself accountable. And I think some of these task lists is great to get everything on task, but you're accountable to your own tasks. And whether you're doing it in isolation by yourself or with a group of people, it's always good to sort of look at it, read it, okay, tick it off, or actually I need more time or training or resources to be able to get that task done. So yeah, that's essentially how we manage ourselves at GSA.
Thank you, Tevita. So let's get back to, I think it's absolutely understanding that, you know, prioritizing the work is very, very important. And if we move on to the next one is, once you've prioritized, is scheduling. You know, when am I going to do what? And Tevita has given you a great tip, you know, use tools that, whatever, I mean, don't worry about purchasing tools, and it could just be a Word document, it could be an Excel spreadsheet, it could be a great Gantt chart, it could be anything, but setting some time for each of the tasks, and really ask yourself, how much can I really do if I'm too tired? Like, you know, if it's the middle of the night and you spend the whole 10 hours doing this work, is it worth me continuing on this assignment, or have a good night rest or watch a movie and then get back to it? Then always recommend the best use of valuable time. See, when are you fresh? When are you able to absorb stuff? Spend that time. Each body works very differently. You would be able to ask yourself, what is good study time for me? Is it when my family is all resting and I have time for myself? Or am I an early morning person? Or is it after my job? And prepare for something like, okay, today it did not work for me. That doesn't mean you've fallen off the wagon, doesn't mean that that's disaster. Get back on it again. And the main thing is trying to not compare yourself with another person. Listen to other people, avoid being stressed because somebody else is doing something in a different way and it's probably not what you're used to. That doesn't mean one size doesn't suit everyone. So I think scheduling, thank you, Tevita, that was a really good slide that you talked about in relation to scheduling. So let's move on after scheduling into the next. I love this matrix, and I just want you all to focus on 4 things. This matrix is really interesting. So if you look at your x-axis, or that's one which goes horizontal, it's really about what's urgent and what's not urgent. And the second one is really the question on what is important and not important. So if you have a whole lot of things and you make a little butcher paper wherever you can, or a piece of paper, make this list and think about what's urgent, what's not urgent, and what's important and what's not important, okay? And once you do that, what really happens is, when you're allocating time, I think there was a question sometime before, is how much of time should I allocate? This matrix helps you in one way. The maximum amount of time you're going to spend is on something that is very urgent and what's important. That means the first quadrant, right on to the left-hand side, if you're facing the screen on top, what's urgent and what's important. The least amount of time that you're going to spend is basically on not important and not urgent, just diagonally opposite. And then really the second one is the time allocation, which is, yeah, it's not urgent, but it's important, and urgent, and not urgent yet important. So I think to make it very clear, it's just a simple cross which has urgent, not urgent, important, and not important. Spend more time on what's urgent and important, and least time on not urgent, not important, and not urgent. That's a simple matrix. And we're just giving tools to people so that, different tools work for different people. So let's move on to actually the, managing time is the most important message that I want to kind of get to you is don't forget to manage yourself. While you're managing all your tasks and other people in your house and, your workplace and your boss and, everybody around the world ringing up overseas and finding if people are fine, and don't forget there's time for yourself. And I always say that to it when we have our grad chat with our parents, and I'm saying it to all graduates too. Remember, you're important. Don't forget to eat and drink, and really be able to prioritize tasks that are around you. So let's move on to, the aspect which is really about small things. Tevita, I just thought it would be good for you to kind of talk through examples that you've kind of done where you have worked through and how you manage time with your staff. Like, you have a project that you're doing, and how do you actually manage the time? And let's talk us through a task list where you manage time, where you had to get a task done, things worked well, things didn't go work well. How did you manage that? And can you just go through the slides in the next 4 slides telling us how you managed that?
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Rachna. So, how to manage time? I mean, what a question. So everyone's notion of time is very different, but I guess what we all have is deadlines. And so for us especially, it's really important to balance your effort. So Rachna talked about it earlier, is that don't all put your eggs all in one basket as it is. We might be better at doing a certain task than another task. And what we tend to do, and I'm also a culprit, is you focus on the stuff you can get done quickly and you enjoy and it's great. But then the harder stuff in the background tends to, you feel it's not as important, but it actually becomes part of the same task. So if you don't put your efforts in a balanced way, you won't achieve those goals, and it does create a lot more stress on you. So, and then there's that notion of just doing small chunks, bit by bit. If you write a bit on something you don't like, write a little bit, move on, come back to it. But you must come back to it. And I think that's, that takes care of the first 2 parts there. So complete your day's allocation. So making sure that what you set out to do that day, you do it. And if you do it quickly, you either use the time to look after yourself or you do something else. And so what we do with our team is that we use the same strategies. And so I know my team very well, and little things like moving our whole engagement online versus face-to-face. For us, it was one of these things. Okay, let's sit down, let's work out what we have to do in what timeline. And as it is with anything online, we had to be quick and reactive and responsive, especially in this environment. And so together we've worked out who was capable of doing what tasks better. And so it was about talking to the staff. Okay, who has an interest in this? Great, you have a look at this, just get that done. How about you? Would you? And together as a team, we were open communication with ourselves. And I think that comes into time with when you're talking about individual work. You have to be open with yourself. You have to be honest with what you can't do, enjoy, don't really enjoy, and that will help you pull together to allocate the tasks daily. And so I think one of the key things is focus on what the output is. And so for us as a team, our output is to deliver an event or activity that meets our goals. So reaching postgraduate student parents, reaching postgraduate researchers, reaching postgraduates in general, and delivering a product or an activity that enriches their life here at University of Melbourne. And so we always focus on that output. Whenever we're designing anything, say, okay, what's the output for our grad students? What is the output? What will make them? Let's have a look at some feedback. Let's see what they're telling us. Great. Let's put that into place so that when we go and when we're designing things, we're saying, okay, we can tick that because that is focusing on that particular output. Also, choosing the times, situation, and people who can assist you do your best. So for us, this links into our partners as well as our own team, but our partners. And we don't pretend to know that we know everything about everything. And I think our biggest strength is working with our partners. And so situations like our webinars, we will ask experts or people in the top of their field to come and talk about something, to tell us what their opinions are. And look, we never pretend to be the experts. What we try and do is provide with information and opinion discussion for the postgraduate students on the call or listening later, because essentially we're all capable of doing great things, and it's just about sharing the information and working with others. Now, one of the other things is when you're trying to manage time, one way is to kind of try and compete with yourself. I mean, in a non-destructive way. So if you know that you can do something in an hour, you know, why don't you say, oh, cool, maybe I can try and do it a bit quicker, or do it differently. I mean, so in your individual space, this is where this kicks into play, is that you can actually get things done one quicker and possibly better or in a different way, just by monitoring how you do things personally. And this is what we do with our team. So obviously we've done orientations every semester for many years, 25 in fact. So we can know what we've done different, what we can do differently each year, how we can refine ourselves, and we compete with ourselves. We're not competing with our competitors or our colleagues, or we're competing with the work that we do. And I think that always generates better outcomes for us, because we're pushing ourselves, we're challenging ourselves. And when you receive those results, and we do it all the time, celebrate it. And what does celebration mean? Something different for everyone. Whether you know, an achievement is actually making it to the exam, sitting through it, answering every question or most of the questions, and coming and going, actually, I did my best. And that is an achievement. And you got to be happy with that, you know. And don't beat yourself up if you don't reach it, but just say, okay, I can do better. You know, I will go back to my task list that I allocated, and I'll do better. And that comes to, you know, competing with yourself. Take constructive feedback from peers, from experts, from colleagues, from just take it on. I mean, it's not always great to hear about the things that it's amazing to hear the things you're doing amazingly, but also it's not always nice to say, oh, okay, I can do better. But just take it on. Don't take it personally. Take it as constructive feedback to be able to do better. The other parts there is, you know, don't bury your head in the sand, pretend that nothing's happening. I think for us as a GSA unit, we always say, okay, guys, let's talk about who's struggling here. Is there anything we should be worried about? What are our plan B's and C's in this particular environment? Has that supplier got back to you about, you know, supplying us with this thing? No, they haven't. How long do we give them? We give them 2 weeks. Right. Call them. You know, if that doesn't help, think of a plan B, and we'll get someone else to jump in just in case this doesn't work. So always looking at other ways to be doing things, and mostly making sure you always hit the deadline. I mean, the deadline it's such a horrible term, but the time and when things are due is always the best way to look at things. And we tend to work backwards from that date, the date and time. So one of the biggest part of this, and I always say this to my team, is being kind to yourself. I mean, take the time to enjoy. And this is about that celebration about, it was a small win. Just say that you've been talking to a supplier, you negotiated a really good price that was in budget, celebrate that. Or you got an assignment on time, or you managed to get 2 drafts done before you submitted. That's a celebration. I mean, it just means that you made the time and you wanted to do better with your work. And also, like, part of this is don't feel guilty about, you know, if you have recreation. Now, look at us now, we're all working from home essentially. And there's going to be times you go, you know what? I don't want to be in front of the laptop or the computer or online for a second. Just take a small break and read a chapter of your favorite book, and don't feel guilty about it, because it's those moments would help us move forward better in the work that we do. And that comes through always at GSA. I mean, we always take time to say, okay, let's take a moment. Let's talk about our favorite things that we do on the weekend in this meeting, just to be able to clear our heads. And don't feel guilty that we're talking about our favorite movies while we're trying to organize orientation. You know, but it's about control as well. And always refresh and refocus is always about it. So and then I think part of that's reflection. So being kind to yourself is also reflecting and having that time for reflection. But yeah, essentially, we use all these methods in what we do at GSA because at the end of the day, we're all human, and we need to be able to get things done, but also look after ourselves as well.
Oh, that's really kind. And I think we have a very good question. That is, you know, what do you do when you have a good plan or schedule, but you struggle with motivation because you just don't see the point of the task? I think we have to acknowledge the world has definitely changed for us in the last 8 weeks. Okay, there is it's a different world for us in the couple of weeks leading to it. There's been so many issues that we've been dealing with. Our lifestyle has changed. So it's very natural. You can have a good plan or a schedule, and our motivation is low. I just want people to know that it's not only for one person, it's for many of us who are there in that space, that feeling of, God, I'm not feeling motivated. I don't feel like getting out of my track pants and wearing something nice and looking, I just want to dress up and just go out somewhere. That's probably sometimes we feel like that. So I think being kind to yourself and also understand that, okay, I did this task. It was meaningless. Don't beat yourself and think, oh my God, I wasted so much of time and I should have known better. That's not going to happen. I think motivation is incremental, and I highly recommend to everyone who's listening to this, this is the time when we do need to seek help. Reach out to GSA. We will give you referrals if you need to people to talk about a little bit of access the exam support at Career Stop One. Talk to your faculty members, talk to your peers on the phone. Don't hesitate to pick up the phone and have a chat. It's absolutely important. So I think we kind of wanted to move and finish up the session with two important slides, Tevita, that we wanted to talk about. We have a couple of minutes left, but I thought if we can move on to the next slide, and that is really, I felt that, you set yourself a goal and you are your own judge and your motivator. Don't let other people determine for you, make judgments about, my God, have you only done that? And I've done this and I haven't done that. I have learned as an adult, and it's something that I love to share with everyone across, whom I can think is, I think half your life you kind of lead with, other people setting your goals and motivating you by coaxing you and pushing you through. But the best way to manage your time is to be your own judge and your own motivator. And also understand that, taking the time today, the people who have attended the session, you may think, I spent one whole hour and I knew all this. I don't know why I spent all that time. I actually feel, even as a CEO, for me to have prepared for this session to work with Tevita, I found it very helpful, because I know that if I use the right tools and I talk about it, it's just a consciousness about the areas that I may need to kind of focus on to make me feel better. So I thank you, Tevita, for the time that you spend in relation to, this project. And definitely we have a series of other workshops coming. I will get Tevita to talk about it, but I just wanted to thank the attendees for having taken the time to listen to this session. This information will be posted on our blog, on our website. But Tevita, what else is happening exciting coming up this week at the webinars or the events?
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks, Rachna. I really enjoyed the conversation today, and thank you to all the attendees. Some great questions out there, and stay tuned. So what we do at GSA with our student engagement team, every Monday to Thursday, we run a webinar at 10 a.m. And if you can't jump on, we always release the recording either the same day or the next day. And so this week is no different. So tomorrow, we're going to be talking to essentially our grad student parents or carers, and we're talking about in the morning, talking about creating a routine for your children at home, and making sure you set some goals. I mean, we talked about goals today about how you interact and set the scene for the kids at home. We also got a drop-in dance session at 2 o'clock tomorrow, and that's just something light and heartfelt just to get you going. And then also on Wednesday, we release a kids challenge. So we send a challenge out every weekend for the children to do at home with their parents, and we have the winners on Mondays. That night on Wednesday, so Wednesday's a big day, we're actually doing a Netflix watch party. It's the movie is Crazy Rich Asians. All you need is a Netflix account, and we'll share it, and we all watch the show together. And the reason we're watching this show, we had a poll in our group on Facebook. So in our Facebook group, we have another group called is Connection in Isolation at GSA. And this is where we ask the students, so what did you want to watch? So they asked for this one in order to talk about it on Thursday. So there's a discussion club or conversation club on Thursday to talk about it. So look out for that. Everything's on our Facebook page. And on Thursday, I'm hosting a session on finances. So we have a financial counselor in from UMSU, and we have Sarah and Tay from CAPS, Counselling and Psychological Services, talk about the stresses that are involved around finances and how it's compounded during COVID-19. So that's on Thursday morning at 10 a.m. Looking forward to that conversation. And then normally we ring out the week on Friday at 3 o'clock with some Feel Good Friday series. We stream live some local musicians and artists to let us journey into the weekend on a high note. So look out for that 3 p.m. on Friday, and we stream via our Facebook. So all the details are on our Facebook. And if you want to get in touch, call us on 1-800-GSA-HELP. Otherwise, info@gsa.unimel.edu.au. And we're here to help. We're all working remotely, but our focus has not changed. So looking forward to the week.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing all the information. And while we look forward to having you next week with a new topic, and we would be very glad to receive any questions from you if you needed any additional support. So please ring the GSA helpline, or please use the email gsaevents@gsa.unimel.edu. Thank you once again.